The massive metal doors of Nexus Station slid open with a deep rumbling sound that echoed through the giant corridor. Kim Tae-ho walked slowly behind his older sister, Kim Nari, as they pushed their heavy cart filled with shiny earth crystals toward their small trading booth. The 16-year-old boy looked around with wide eyes at all the strange alien creatures moving through the busy marketplace. Nexus Station was the biggest trading post in this part of the galaxy, where beings from hundreds of different worlds came to buy and sell goods. The ceiling stretched so high above them that Tae-ho could barely see the top, and thousands of colorful lights blinked and flashed from signs written in languages he could not read. The air smelled like a mixture of exotic spices, strange chemicals, and something that reminded him of burnt metal. Tall, blue-skinned Zenthari floated past them, using some kind of anti-gravity technology, while short, furry Mokari scurried between the larger aliens, carrying bags bigger than themselves. In one corner, a group of insect-like Vespari clicked and buzzed at each other in their strange language. While examining some kind of glowing purple substance, Tae-ho had never seen so many different types of life forms in one place. Before, his sister Nari was much more used to all this strangeness, since she had been coming to the station for almost 2 years now. She moved through the crowd with confidence, pushing their cart around slower aliens and nodding politely to the few traders who recognized them. Most aliens barely looked at the two humans as they passed by, which was exactly how Nari preferred things to be. The human section of the marketplace was small and tucked away in a corner, where fewer aliens bothered to visit. Only 5 human families had trading licenses for this station, and they all knew each other well. Their booths were simple metal tables, with basic display cases, nothing fancy, like the elaborate shops that some of the wealthier alien species operated nearby. Tae-ho helped his sister unload their crystals and arrange them in neat rows on their display table. These minerals were special because they only formed on Earth under very specific conditions that did not exist on other planets. Many alien technologies needed these crystals to work properly, which made them valuable enough for humans to make a living selling them. As they worked, Tae-ho noticed how other alien traders would sometimes stare at them with expressions he could not quite understand. Some looked curious, like they were studying strange animals at a zoo. Others seemed annoyed or disgusted, as if humans did not belong in their marketplace. A few appeared amused, like they thought it was funny that such weak-looking creatures were trying to run a business. The boy had learned to ignore most of these looks over the past few months, but they still made him feel uncomfortable. He was smaller than average, even for a human, and his quiet personality made him an easy target for bullies. His sister was much better at standing up to rude aliens who tried to cheat them or cause trouble. During their first hour of trading, they sold several small crystals to a polite Zenthari merchant who always treated them fairly. But business was slow today, and many aliens seemed more interested in the flashy displays from the bigger alien corporations than the simple human booth tucked away in the corner. Tae-ho was reorganizing their inventory when he heard heavy footsteps approaching their area. He looked up to see a group of customers walking toward them, but his heart sank when he realized what species they were. Draknari soldiers were among the most feared warriors in the entire galaxy, and their reputation for violence was known even on distant Earth. The lead soldier was massive even by Draknari standards, standing nearly 9 feet tall with thick gray scales covering his muscular body. His armor was covered in battle, scars and strange symbols that probably represented all the enemies he had defeated in combat. 3 other Draknari followed behind him, all looking equally dangerous and intimidating. Nari was away from the booth getting more supplies from their storage unit, leaving Tae-ho alone to deal with these frightening customers. He tried to stay calm and remember what his sister had taught him about dealing with difficult aliens. Always be polite, never show fear, and try to make the sale as quickly as possible, so they would go away. The lead Draknari stopped directly in front of their booth and stared down at Taiho with cold yellow eyes that seemed to look right through him. The alien was so tall that the human boy had to crane his neck just to see his face. The other soldiers spread out around the booth, blocking any easy escape routes. Not that Taiho was planning to run away. Other aliens in the marketplace began to notice what was happening, and many stopped their own trading to watch the scene unfold. Some moved closer to get a better view, while others backed away, not wanting to get caught up in whatever trouble was about to start. The atmosphere in the entire section became tense and quiet. The Draknari commander spoke in a deep, gravelly voice that made Taiho think of rocks grinding together. He introduced himself as Vextar and demanded to see their most valuable crystals. The way he said it made it clear that he was not planning to pay for anything he took, but Taiho did not know how to refuse such a dangerous request. With shaking hands, the young human carefully brought out their best crystals and placed them on the display table. The minerals caught the station lights and sparkled with beautiful colors that seemed to dance and shift as they moved. Vextar picked up the largest crystal and examined it closely, while his soldiers grabbed several others. When Taiho quietly mentioned the price for the crystals, Vextar laughed loudly and told him that Draknari warriors do not pay tribute to inferior species. The commander explained that humans should feel honored to give gifts to such mighty warriors, and that asking for payment was insulting to their warrior pride. The crowd of watching aliens grew larger, as word spread that something interesting was happening in the human section. Some species that normally avoided this area came over to see what all the excitement was about. Nobody wanted to miss watching a confrontation between the feared Draknari and the supposedly weak humans. Taiho found himself in an impossible situation. If he let them take the crystals, his family would lose a huge amount of money and might not be able to afford their trading license next month. But if he continued to insist on payment, he might anger these dangerous warriors even more. The young human wished his sister would return soon, but she was nowhere to be seen. The tension continued to build as Vexitar and his soldiers made it clear they planned to take whatever they wanted from the human booth. The other alien traders watched nervously, knowing that this kind of bullying behavior could spread to their own businesses if nobody stood up to it, but none of them were brave enough or strong enough to challenge the mighty Draknari warriors. As the confrontation reached its peak, Taiho made a decision that would change everything. He took a deep breath and politely but firmly asked the Draknari commander to either pay for the crystals or return them to the booth. His quiet voice barely carried over the noise of the crowd, but everyone heard his words clearly. The marketplace fell completely silent as every alien present realized what the human boy had just done. He had essentially challenged one of the most dangerous warriors in the galaxy, knowing full well that it could cost him his life. The watching crowd held their breath, waiting to see how Commander Vextar would respond to this unexpected act of defiance from such a small and seemingly helpless opponent. Commander Vextar stopped moving completely, as if he could not believe what he had just heard from the small human boy standing in front of him. The massive Draknari warrior slowly turned his head to look down at Taiho with an expression of pure shock that quickly transformed into burning anger. His yellow eyes began to glow brighter, and his scaled hands clenched into fists the size of melons. The three other Draknari soldiers immediately moved closer to their commander, ready to follow. Whatever orders he gave them, their own hands moved to the weapons hanging from their belts, and their muscular bodies tensed like coiled springs waiting to be released. The air around them seemed to crackle with dangerous energy that made nearby aliens step back even further. Taiho felt his heart beating so fast he thought it might explode in his chest, but he forced himself to stand straight and meet the alien commander's terrifying gaze. He knew he was probably about to die, but something deep inside him refused to back down when his family's livelihood was being threatened. His hands shook slightly, but his voice remained steady as he repeated his request for payment. The watching crowd of aliens grew even larger as news of the confrontation spread throughout the trading station. Beings from dozens of different species pushed forward to get a better view of what many believed would be the last moments of the brave human boy's life. Some of the more peaceful species looked worried and upset, while others seemed excited to witness violence. A group of wealthy Zenthari merchants whispered among themselves about whether they should try to intervene to save the human's life, but they knew that interfering in Draknari business was extremely dangerous. Several insect-like Vespari began making clicking sounds that their species used when they sensed death approaching. The furry Makari traders started placing bets on how long the human would survive. Commander Vextar began to speak in a voice so low and threatening that it made the metal floor of the station vibrate beneath everyone's feet. He told Taiho that no inferior species had ever dared to make demands of a Draknari warrior and lived to tell about it. The commander explained that humans were nothing more than weak parasites who had somehow tricked their way into joining the galactic community. The alien warrior's voice grew louder and more angry as he continued his speech. He shouted about how humans came from a pathetic little planet that no one had ever heard of before, and how they had no right to trade alongside real civilizations. The commander's words echoed throughout the marketplace, causing even more aliens to stop what they were doing too. Listen Vexter grabbed one of the largest crystals from the display table and held it up for everyone to see. He announced that he was taking it as payment for the insult the human had given him by asking a mighty warrior to pay for goods. The other Draknari soldiers laughed and began picking up more crystals from the booth, adding them to their collection. Taiho watched helplessly as the aliens took his family's most valuable merchandise, knowing that losing these crystals would mean they might have to leave the trading station and return to Earth in failure. His sister had worked so hard to build their small business, and he could not bear the thought of letting her down because he was too weak to stop these bullies. The young human took another deep breath and stepped forward, despite every instinct in his body screaming at him to run away. He politely but firmly told Commander Vextar that the crystals belonged to his family and asked him once again to either pay for them or return them to the booth. His voice was quiet, but somehow carried clearly through the hushed marketplace. A gasp went up from the watching crowd as they realized the human boy was still defying the dangerous Draknari commander, even after being threatened with death. Several aliens began backing away further, not wanting to be caught in the violence that was surely about to explode. The peaceful Zenthari started muttering prayers in their ancient language. Vextar's face turned an even darker shade of gray as his anger reached new heights. He could not believe that this tiny, weak creature was continuing to challenge him in front of so many witnesses. If he allowed a human to disrespect him like this, his reputation as a feared warrior would be destroyed. The commander knew he had to make an example that would be remembered throughout the galaxy. The other Draknari soldiers spread out in a semicircle behind their leader, effectively trapping Taiho against his family's booth, with nowhere to run. Their hands rested on their weapons, and their eyes gleamed with anticipation of the violence to come. The largest soldier cracked his knuckles with sounds like breaking bones. Just then, Nari returned from getting supplies and saw the dangerous situation her little brother had gotten himself into. She tried to push through the crowd of watching aliens to reach him, but there were too many bodies blocking her path. She shouted Taiho's name, but her voice was lost in the noise of the excited crowd. Commander Vextar raised his massive fist high above his head and declared that he would teach all the inferior species watching what happened to anyone who dared to disrespect the mighty Draknari Empire. The crowd held its breath waiting for the crushing blow that would end the young human's life, but something unexpected was about to happen. The tension in the air became so thick it felt like a heavy blanket pressing down on everyone in the marketplace. Even the station's air recycling systems seemed to grow quieter, as if the entire structure was holding its breath. Aliens who had never seen a human before were about to witness something that would change their understanding of Earth's people forever. Taiho stood his ground, despite the overwhelming fear coursing through his body. He thought about his sister who had sacrificed so much to give them a chance at a better life. He thought about his parents back on Earth who were counting on them to succeed. He thought about all the other human families on the station who would suffer if they showed weakness. Now, the young human's hands stopped shaking as a strange calm settled over him. He looked up at the massive alien warrior towering above him and spoke in a clear, steady voice that surprised even himself. He told Vextar that he understood the commander was stronger and more dangerous, but that did not give him the right to steal from hard-working people. The marketplace fell into complete silence as everyone processed what they had just witnessed. The small human boy was not begging for his life or trying to run away. Instead, he was calmly standing up to one of the most feared warriors in the galaxy and explaining why what the Draknari was doing was wrong. This was not how anyone expected a weak human to behave when faced with certain death. Commander Vextar could not contain his rage any longer at being lectured about right and wrong by what he considered to be the lowest form of life in the galaxy. The massive Draknari warrior let out a roar that shook the metal walls of the trading station and caused several smaller aliens to fall backwards in terror. His voice echoed like thunder as he declared that he would show everyone what happened to creatures that dared to challenge Draknari authority. Without any warning, the alien commander drew back his enormous leg and delivered a devastating kick directly to Taiho's stomach. The impact was so powerful that it lifted the young human completely off his feet and sent him flying backward through the air like a broken doll. The sound of the kick connecting with flesh echoed through the marketplace. Like a gunshot, Taiho crashed into the metal wall behind his family's booth with tremendous force that dented the reinforced steel plating. The impact was so violent that several display cases fell over and crystals scattered across the floor in all directions. The young human's body crumpled to the ground like a discarded piece of clothing, and he lay motionless for several terrifying seconds. A collective gasp rose from the watching crowd as aliens from dozens of species stared in horror at what they had just witnessed. Many had seen violence before, but the sheer brutality and unfairness of a trained warrior attacking an unarmed civilian shocked even the most hardened traitors. The peaceful Zenthari began weeping, while others looked away, unable to watch any longer. Blood began to flow from Taiho's mouth and nose, painting red streaks across his pale face. His breathing came in short, gasping sounds that could barely be heard over the noise of the crowd. Several aliens who had medical knowledge shook their heads sadly, believing that no one could survive such a devastating attack from a Draknari warrior. Commander Vextar stood over the fallen. Human with his massive arms crossed, looking extremely pleased with himself, he turned to address the stunned crowd and began speaking in a loud, booming voice that carried to every corner of the marketplace. The alien warrior explained that this was what happened to inferior species who forgot their place in the galactic order. The Draknari commander went on to describe how humans were nothing more than weak, soft creatures who belonged at the bottom of the food chain. He boasted about his own strength and the power of his warrior race, while gesturing toward Taiho's broken body as proof of human weakness. The other 3 Draknari soldiers nodded and laughed at their leader's words. Several alien traders who had been watching began to back away, not wanting to be associated with what had just happened, while others moved closer to get a better look at the aftermath of the attack. The atmosphere in the marketplace became heavy, with a mixture of fear, disgust, and morbid curiosity, as everyone tried to process what they had witnessed. Nari finally managed to push through the crowd just in time to see her little brother lying motionless on the cold metal floor. She let out a scream of anguish that cut through all the other noise and tried to rush to his side, but several other human traders held her back, knowing that approaching now might provoke the Draknari soldiers to attack her as well. The alien commander continued his victory speech, explaining to the gathered crowd that this lesson should be remembered by all the weaker species who traded on the station. He warned that anyone who showed disrespect to Draknari warriors would face the same fate as the foolish human boy who had dared to challenge him. Some of the watching aliens began to murmur among themselves about whether what they had just seen was legal or justified, while others simply wanted to leave before they became involved in the situation. The tension in the air was thick enough to cut, as everyone waited to see what would happen next. But as Commander Vexitar continued to brag about his victory, something unexpected began to happen behind him. Taiho's fingers began to twitch slightly, and his breathing gradually became stronger and more regular. The young human's eyes fluttered open, revealing a look of pain mixed with something much more dangerous. Slowly and carefully, Taiho began to push himself up from the floor, using the wall behind him for support. His movements were shaky at first, but grew steadier. With each passing second, blood still dripped from his face, but his eyes remained focused and alert as he struggled to stand upright. The first alien to notice what was happening was a small Mokari trader who pointed at the rising human with one furry finger. Several others turned to look, and soon word began to spread through the crowd that the supposedly dead boy was somehow getting back to his feet. Despite the devastating attack he had suffered, Commander Vexitar was still facing the crowd and speaking about Draknari superiority when one of his soldiers tugged on his arm and pointed toward the human booth. The commander turned around, expecting to see his victim still lying motionless on the ground, but instead found himself staring at Taiho, who was now standing upright despite his obvious injuries. The massive alien warrior's expression changed from smug satisfaction to confusion and then to anger as he realized that his devastating attack had failed to keep the human down. He had put enough force into that kick to kill most species instantly. But somehow, this weak-looking boy was not only alive, but standing on his own 2 feet. The watching crowd fell silent once again as they witnessed something that should have been impossible, according to everything they knew about human physiology. Many aliens had heard stories about Earth being a dangerous planet, but none of them had really understood what that meant until now. Taiho wiped blood from his mouth with the back of his hand and looked directly at Commander Vexitar with an expression that had changed completely from the polite, fearful boy he had been just moments before. The pain from his injuries was intense, but something deeper and more primitive had awakened inside him. The young human's breathing became steady and controlled despite his injuries, and his muscles began to tense in ways that suggested hidden strength beneath his seemingly fragile exterior. His hands clenched into fists, and his stance shifted subtly into something that looked almost predatory. The atmosphere in the marketplace changed dramatically as aliens who had been prepared to witness a funeral suddenly realized they might be about to see something entirely different. The peaceful species looked worried, while the more aggressive ones seemed excited by this unexpected turn of events. Commander Vexitar could not believe what he was seeing, and his confusion quickly transformed into rage at being embarrassed in front of so many witnesses. He had expected his demonstration of power to end with a dead human and a crowd of terrified aliens, but instead found himself facing a defiant opponent who refused to stay down despite suffering what should have been fatal injuries. Something fundamental had changed in Taiho during those moments when he lay crumpled against the wall. The devastating attack that should have killed him or left him permanently disabled had instead awakened something deep within his human DNA that had been sleeping until this moment of extreme crisis. His body was still injured, but his mind had become crystal clear and focused. The young human could feel every muscle in his body responding differently than they ever had before. The gravity, on Earth was much stronger than on most other planets, which meant that humans who grew up there developed incredibly dense muscle fibers and bone structures without even realizing it. What looked like weakness to alien eyes was actually compressed, power waiting to be unleashed. Years of helping his family move heavy cargo containers and working in Earth's crushing gravitational field had built strength in Taiho that he had never fully understood or utilized. His small frame had hidden the fact that his muscles could generate forces that would shock most alien species if they ever saw what humans were truly capable of when pushed beyond their limits. Commander Vextar decided that he needed to finish what he had started before this embarrassing situation got any worse. The massive Draknari warrior began walking toward Taiho, with his clawed hands extended ready to crush the life out of the defiant human boy. Once and for all, his soldiers moved to flank him, ready to assist, if needed. But as the alien commander approached, something in Taiho's posture and breathing pattern triggered ancient warning signals that evolution had built into most predator species. Vextar had survived countless battles by learning to recognize when prey animals were about to do something unexpected and dangerous. The watching crowd sensed the change in atmosphere as well, and many aliens who had been moving closer now began backing away again. Their survival instincts were telling them that something significant was about to happen. Even though their logical minds could not understand how a small injured human could pose any threat to a trained Draknari warrior, Taiho's sister Nari watched from the edge of the crowd with tears streaming down her face as she saw her little brother preparing to face impossible odds. She knew how gentle and kind he normally was, but she could see that the boy standing in front of the alien commander was someone entirely different. The transformation was not just physical, but mental as well. Taiho's mind had shifted into a state that humans rarely experienced in their modern civilized lives. It was the same mental state that had allowed his ancestors to hunt dangerous predators on Earth and survive in conditions that would kill most other species. Millions of years of evolution on one of the most dangerous planets in the galaxy had programmed certain responses into human DNA that only activated during moments of extreme threat. When those responses awakened, they transformed ordinary people into something far more formidable than their appearance suggested. The young human's breathing became completely controlled and his heart rate actually slowed down despite the adrenaline flooding his system. His vision sharpened until he could see every detail of the approaching alien warrior, including tiny movements that telegraphed where the next attack would come from. Commander Vexatar raised his massive clawed hands above his head, preparing to bring them down with enough force to crush Taiho's skull like an eggshell. The alien warrior was confident that this time his attack would be successful and the annoying human would finally be silenced permanently. The other three Draknari soldiers positioned themselves around the confrontation to prevent any interference from the watching crowd. They were already planning how they would describe this victory to their fellow warriors back at their base and how it would add to their commander's fearsome reputation. But as Vextar began his downward strike, Taiho moved with speed that caught everyone completely off guard. The young human stepped forward instead of back, and his right hand shot upward faster than most alien eyes could follow. The movement was so quick and precise that it looked almost like a blur. The first indication that something had gone wrong for the Draknari commander was the sound of his own surprised grunt as Taiho's fist connected with his temple. The impact sent shockwaves through Vextar's massive skull and caused his vision to blur temporarily. He had never been hit that hard by anything smaller than a battle mech. The watching crowd gasped as they realized that the human boy had actually managed to strike the alien warrior, and not only that, but the strike had clearly caused significant damage. The peaceful Zenthari began chanting prayers, while the more aggressive species leaned forward eagerly anticipating what would happen next. Vextar staggered backward, clutching his head in pain and confusion. He could not understand how such a small, weak-looking creature had generated enough force to actually hurt him through his thick, scaled skin and reinforced bone structure. It should have been physically impossible. Taiho did not pause to admire his first successful strike. Instead, he followed up immediately with a devastating elbow blow to the exact same spot on the alien's temple. The second impact drove even deeper, into the already weakened area, and caused Vextar to drop to one knee. The three other Draknari soldiers started to move forward to help their commander, but they were too slow to react to the incredible speed the human was displaying. Their training had never prepared them for an opponent who could move this fast or hit this hard, especially one who looked so harmless. The alien commander tried to shake off the effects of the two powerful blows and regain his footing, but his coordination had been severely disrupted by the impacts to his head. His vision kept blurring and his balance was completely off, making it difficult to mount any kind of effective counterattack. Taiho could see that his opponent was wounded and disoriented, which meant he had only seconds before the other soldiers would reach him, and the fight would become impossible to win. He needed to end this confrontation immediately before the situation got even worse. The young human gathered all his strength and momentum for one final devastating attack. His ancestors on Earth had developed techniques for bringing down creatures much larger than themselves, and those ancient instincts guided his movements as he prepared to deliver the finishing blow. What happened next would be talked about in trading stations across the galaxy for generations to come. The entire sequence of events took exactly 3 seconds, but those 3 seconds completely changed how every alien species viewed humanity, and what humans were capable of when their survival instincts fully activated. During the first second, Taiho launched himself upward using the full power of his earth-conditioned leg muscles to drive his joined fists toward the exact spot on Vextar's temple, where he had already created a weak point. The impact was so powerful that the sound echoed through the entire marketplace like a thunderclap. Commander Vextar's supposedly indestructible skull, which had survived direct hits from energy. Weapons and impacts with armored vehicles cracked under the incredible force generated by the human boy's precisely aimed strike. The alien warrior's eyes went wide with shock and agony as pain exploded through his massive head. The second brought even more devastating results as the force of Taiho's attack drove the already wounded Draknari commander backward and down toward the metal floor of the trading station. Vextar's legs buckled completely, and he began to fall with his hands clutching desperately at his damaged head. During the third and final second, Taiho followed his falling opponent down and delivered one more crushing blow to ensure that the fight was completely finished. The alien warrior's body hit the floor with a tremendous crash that shook the entire booth and sent more crystals scattering in all directions. The massive Draknari commander lay completely motionless on the cold metal floor with his eyes closed and blood trickling from his nose and mouth. His breathing was shallow and irregular, but he was still alive, though clearly unconscious and severely injured. The supposedly invincible warrior had been defeated by a 16-year-old human boy. Complete silence fell over the entire marketplace, as hundreds of alien witnesses tried to process what they had just seen with their own eyes. Many of them had difficulty believing it, even though they had watched every second of the incredible fight. Some began rubbing their eyes, wondering if they were hallucinating. The 3 remaining Draknari soldiers stopped in their tracks and stared at their unconscious commander lying at the feet of the small human boy. Their hands moved away from their weapons as they realized that attacking Taiho might result in them joining their leader on the floor. Taiho stood over the fallen alien warrior, breathing heavily, but still clearly ready to continue fighting if necessary. His clothes were torn and bloody from the earlier attack, but his eyes burned with an intensity that made even the largest aliens in the crowd take several steps backward. The young human looked around at all the watching faces and spoke in a clear, steady voice that carried throughout the silent marketplace. He explained that he had not wanted to hurt anyone, but that he would not allow bullies to steal from his family or threaten innocent people. Several aliens who had medical training pushed through the crowd to check on Commander Vexitar's condition. They confirmed that he was still alive, but would need serious medical attention. The massive warrior had suffered a concussion and possible skull fractures from the humans' devastating attacks. The other 3 Draknari soldiers looked at each other, uncertainly not sure what they should do next. Their commander was unconscious, and the human who had defeated him was still standing there looking ready to fight all of them if they tried anything. The situation was completely outside their training, and experience word of the incredible fight began spreading through the station's communication systems, and within minutes, beings throughout the massive structure were talking about the human boy who had defeated a Draknari commander in single combat. Many refused to believe the reports, at first thinking they must be exaggerated. The peaceful Zenthari merchants began offering medical supplies to help treat both Taeho's injuries and those of the unconscious Draknari commander. They believed that showing mercy to fallen enemies was important, even when those enemies had been the aggressors in the confrontation. Other human families on the station began arriving at the scene, having heard the news through their own communication networks. They looked at Taeho with mixtures of pride, concern, and amazement, unable to believe that the quiet boy they knew had just accomplished something so incredible. The furry Mokari traders, who had been placing bets on the fight, began paying out winnings to the few aliens who had been brave enough or foolish enough to bet on the human. None of them had expected to lose money on what seemed like such a sure thing. Station security forces finally arrived to investigate the disturbance, but they were not sure how to handle a situation where a civilian had defeated a Draknari warrior in what appeared to be self-defense. The legal implications were complex and unprecedented. Commander Vexitar began to regain consciousness, slowly, groaning in pain and confusion as he tried to understand what had happened to him. The massive alien warrior attempted to sit up, but immediately fell back down as dizziness and nausea overwhelmed his damaged nervous system. The medical team that had arrived to help determined that both combatants needed to be taken to the station's hospital for proper treatment. Taeho had suffered internal injuries from the initial kick, while Vexitar had severe head trauma that could have long-term effects. As the medical personnel prepared to transport the injured aliens, the watching crowd began to disperse, though many continued to stare at Taeho with newfound respect and wariness. They were beginning to understand that humans were far more dangerous than anyone had previously believed. The 3 remaining Draknari soldiers carefully lifted their unconscious commander and began carrying him toward the medical bay. Their earlier arrogance and confidence had been completely replaced by uncertainty and fear. They kept glancing back at Taeho, as if expecting him to attack them as well. News of the fight continued to spread throughout the galactic communication networks, reaching trading stations and colonies across dozens of star systems. The story grew, more incredible with each retelling, but the basic facts remained the same. A human teenager had defeated one of the galaxy's most feared warriors in hand-to-hand combat. Within hours of the incident, every major news network in the galaxy was broadcasting reports about the impossible fight that had taken place on Nexus Station. Military analysts from dozens of species studied security footage of the confrontation, trying to understand how such a small human had generated enough force to defeat a trained Draknari warrior. The footage showed Taeho's movements in slow motion, revealing the incredible precision and power behind each strike that had brought down. Commander Vexitar's xenobiology experts, who had previously dismissed humans as weak, began frantically revising their assessments of Earth's dominant species. Scientists across the galaxy started requesting detailed information about Earth's environmental conditions, particularly the planet's unusually strong gravitational field and the dangerous predators that had shaped human evolution for millions of years. They began to understand that what they had mistaken for weakness was actually incredible strength compressed into a deceptively small package. The Draknari High Command received reports of the incident with disbelief and rage that quickly transformed into grudging respect when they viewed the security recordings themselves. They had never seen one of their warriors defeated so decisively by an opponent using only natural weapons and physical strength. Other military organizations throughout the galaxy began reassessing their intelligence about human capabilities and started developing new training protocols to prepare their soldiers for potential encounters with Earth's people. The peaceful reputation that humans had maintained since joining the galactic community was suddenly replaced by cautious respect back on Nexus Station. The atmosphere in the marketplace had changed completely. Alien traders who had previously ignored or looked down on the human merchants now approached their booths with polite curiosity and genuine interest in doing business. A small human section of the trading post became one of the busiest areas on the entire station. Taiho spent 3 days in the station's medical facility, recovering from his injuries. But the doctors were amazed by how quickly his body healed compared to most other species. They attributed his rapid recovery to the same evolutionary adaptations that had allowed him to defeat the Draknari commander. During his recovery period, dozens of alien reporters and scientists requested interviews with the young human who had shocked the galaxy. Most were interested in learning more about Earth and its people, while others wanted to understand the fighting techniques he had used. The boy found all the attention overwhelming and uncomfortable since he had never wanted to hurt anyone or become famous. He repeatedly explained that he had only been trying to protect his family's livelihood and had not intended to start a galactic incident. His sister Nari visited him every day bringing news from their trading booth, which was now busier than ever before. Aliens from species they had never met were coming specifically to buy crystals from the humans who had proven they were not to be underestimated. The 3 surviving Draknari soldiers had initially planned to seek revenge for their commander's defeat, but after watching the security footage, they decided it would be wiser to return to their home planet and report what they had learned about human capabilities. Their warrior culture actually began to develop a grudging respect for Taiho's fighting skills. Commander Vextar survived his injuries but suffered permanent damage to his memory and coordination. He was forced to retire from active duty and spent the rest of his life warning other Draknari about the hidden dangers of underestimating humans. The once proud warrior became a living reminder that appearances could be deceiving. Other human families on trading stations throughout the galaxy reported sudden changes in how they were treated by alien customers, and official species that had previously been dismissive or hostile now approached humans with careful politeness and genuine respect for their potential capabilities. The Galactic Trade Council reviewed the incident and officially ruled that Taiho had acted in self-defense when protecting his family's property from theft. They used the case to establish new guidelines about the rights of smaller trading families to defend themselves against larger, more powerful species. Earth's government received detailed reports about the incident and began to understand that their people's reputation in the galactic community had changed overnight. Diplomatic officials started preparing for a new era of interspecies relations where humans would be viewed as potentially dangerous rather than harmless. Military recruiters from several alien species began visiting Earth to study human training methods and physical capabilities. They were particularly interested in understanding how a planet's environmental conditions could produce such unexpectedly powerful beings. The story of the fight became part of galactic folklore, with different species adding their own cultural interpretations to the tale. Some viewed it as a cautionary story about judging others by appearances, while others saw it as proof that even the smallest beings could be dangerous when threatened. Taiho eventually returned to working at his family's trading booth, but his life had changed forever. Alien customers treated him with a mixture of respect and wariness that made him uncomfortable. He had never wanted to be feared or famous, and often wished he could return to the quiet anonymity he had enjoyed before. The Young Human began receiving offers from military organizations and security companies throughout the galaxy who wanted to hire him as a trainer or consultant. Many were willing to pay enormous sums for his knowledge of human combat techniques and physical capabilities, but Taiho chose to remain with his family and continue their simple trading business. He believed that showing aliens the peaceful side of humanity was just as important as demonstrating their hidden strength. When reporters asked why he did not capitalize on his fame, he explained that he was not a warrior, but simply a boy who had protected his family. The incident marked the beginning of a new chapter in human-galactic relations, as more families ventured out to distant trading posts and colonies. They carried with them the knowledge that they were no longer seen as helpless victims, but as beings capable of defending themselves when necessary. Years later, when Commander Vextar was asked about his thoughts on the fight, he would say that humans had taught him the most important lesson a warrior could learn, that true strength often comes in packages that no one expects. The galaxy had learned to never again underestimate the quiet species from the small, blue planet called Earth.